what we find is that companies, especially at the larger end, who might already have an innovation team, for example, often end up in a world where that innovation team feels stuck. And that stuck feeling comes from kind of what I was describing a moment ago, the need to talk about innovation and put somebody in place as a figurehead or as somebody who is kind of running that effort. But if you don't equip those people in those teams with the materials, the resources, and frankly the kind of cultural mindset that they need to actually make those efforts a reality, it becomes very difficult and very frustrating for innovation teams to have an impact over time. And so we help companies think about, what venture-driven growth might look like for them, how corporate venture capital might be integrated into their organization, what it looks like to partner with younger or startup companies that sit outside of the organization but might end up being a disruptor within their industry, things like that.
Welcome to the Grow and Learn podcast, your go-to source for expertise and insights on a variety of topics: business growth, leadership, technology, personal and business finance, and more. We've curated a vast network of business experts ready to address your company's most pressing challenges. From corporate growth strategy to leadership, marketing strategy, sales strategy, branding, customer relations, technology, AI, IT security, and beyond, we connect you to the best experts for your needs. Reach out to us for more information or schedule a call at grownlearn.org to explore how we can support you. Today, we're speaking to Danny Nathan, founder and CEO of Apollo21, a company that is on the intersection of a consultancy, venture studio, product design studio. He's a creative person. He's dipped his toe in a lot of industries and venues of life. So I'm curious to talk about such a diverse personality in a good sense. Hi, Danny.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. What's with the name Apollo? Tell us a bit about this story.
I get that one a lot. Naming a company is always such a greenfield opportunity. And as I was thinking about what we do at Apollo21 and what the opportunities were, it led me to thinking about just sort of the idea of moonshots in general. And of course, the Apollo program was the original moonshot here in the US. And so I started digging into a little bit of the history of the Apollo program and discovered that Apollo 20 was the last scheduled Apollo mission. And so I just sort of liked the idea that, we were next in line to help companies take their moonshot. And we were also founded in 2021. So there was a nice alignment there. And it gives us lots of fertile territory to play with from a branding perspective.
Okay, so Apollo was not the name of the moon mission. I thought there was only one. What do you mean the last one was number 20?
Oh, no, there were many Apollo missions. There were 17 Apollo missions that actually flew, and then the last three were canceled for budgetary reasons. So 18, 19, and 20 never happened.
Where did they fly to then?
The moon?
Seriously? Okay,
Yes.
I was only aware of the first one, and then there were questions of why they never went back to the moon, but apparently they did. Did they?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there were multiple moon missions. Some they actually landed on the moon, some they didn't. They didn't land. They just did early flybys, things like that. But there were numerous Apollo missions.
Uh-huh. Okay, interesting. I learned something new every day. I was left with the impression that 21 was like a something like a platform, because there were these platforms but I think there were 24 maybe for cars, platform 24, auto 24. Are you aware of these?
No, I'm not familiar with those.
Okay. Anyhow. So what's your story, Danny? How did you get into venture capital, product design, consultancy?
Oh man, it's been a long and twisted path. I started my career many years ago in advertising, and very quickly realized that I didn't enjoy advertising in general and didn't really like interrupting people's lives at inopportune times to try and sell them something by screaming at them in a TV commercial or, slapping a big magazine ad in their face. And so I made a point to kind of shift my career away from advertising and spent a little time trying to find myself, if you will, figure out what I wanted to do, and ultimately landed at an innovation consultancy here in New York that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I ended up spending about 5 years at that company. I was one of the first 10 or so employees. And so I felt like I had a lot of opportunity to impact how work got done and how we engage with our clients, and then also to learn a ton that I hadn't previously been exposed to in the technology space. And so that kind of 5 year experience really shaped the remainder of my career since and pushed me headlong into the technology and entrepreneurship space.
Mhm. And one of the buzzwords or the keywords that you have in your company is also innovation. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you approach innovation? Do you use technology? Tell us a bit about it, and then we'll delve in more
Yeah,
in depth.
innovation's a funny one. It's one of those words that gets thrown around a lot and often, sort of loses its meaning. And so what we find is that a lot of companies talk about pursuing innovation or how they're being innovative, things like that. But when you really sort of start to peel away the layers of the onion, what you find is that frankly, much of it is a talking point, not much of an
Mm,
action point. And
yeah.
so, having spent much of my career focused on the innovation space and helping companies understand what it means to be innovative, what practices they need to put in place, what the operational and cultural impacts of a commitment to innovation look like, and then, of course, what the future facing benefits of making innovation kind of a core pillar might look like. And so, we talk to a lot of clients about the opportunities for building longevity and what it means to instill a culture of innovation within your organization, and kind of growing comfortable with the idea that if you're going to be innovating, you're going to be trying and ultimately failing along the way. And that's something that's difficult for both companies in general and people within companies to kind of wrap their head around and get comfortable with. And so we help them get comfortable with the idea of failure in their everyday work and creating opportunities for learning out of that failure so that they can do funky experiments at the sort of gray edges of whatever space they're in and learn about future opportunities so that they can continue to find new revenue lines, explore new business models, and ultimately build a lasting company.
Mhm. Does your work go more along the lines of cultural reorganization, or do you go into processes? What is the extent of the consulting that you do in terms of innovation?
We are less focused on kind of the cultural impacts or the cultural restructuring, although we are happy to kind of play in that area and help people learn from our learnings over time. But generally, we are more focused on the technology side of things, helping companies understand what it means to focus on innovation and how they can bring that to life. So we're helping them instill processes and frameworks for approaching the work behind innovation, and then helping them execute on that work, usually the first time or two through, to bring something new to life so that they can kind of see how it all comes together. And then from there, we work with them to figure out, whether they want to keep engaging us for that or whether they want to internalize those types of changes. And that's where we kind of get more involved in the restructuring along the lines of, okay, we've built a software team around a product, for example, that we've helped you create. Do you want to bring that software team in-house, or do you need help building an internal software team so that you can keep doing the things that we've been doing together?
Yeah. What are the typical industries or the sizes of companies that contact you for innovation services?
We are all over the map. So, as one might expect, we do a fair bit of work with early stage startups and with founders who are trying to figure out how to get new ideas and new companies off the ground. And then we also work with anybody up to, Fortune 100 size organizations to help them envision new product opportunities, new revenue lines, new business models, and then to help them bring that to life. And what we find is that companies, especially at the larger end, who might already have an innovation team, for example, often end up in a world where that innovation team feels stuck. And that stuck feeling comes from kind of what I was describing a moment ago, the need to talk about innovation and put somebody in place as as a figurehead or as somebody who is kind of running that effort. But if you don't equip those people in those teams with the materials, the resources, and frankly the kind of cultural mindset that they need to actually make those efforts a reality, it becomes very difficult and very frustrating for innovation teams to have an impact over time. And so we help companies think about, what venture-driven growth might look like for them, how corporate venture capital might be integrated into their organization, what it looks like to partner with younger or startup companies that sit outside of the organization but might end up being a disruptor within their industry, things like that. And we as a company, Apollo21, are generally industry agnostic. So we've done work like this for anything from remote guarding and security to restaurants and fitness and music and health companies and financial services and sort of everything across the board.
Mm-hmm. So when you do the projects and you recommend, let's say, for a larger corporation to go into corporate venture capital and invest in startups, do you actually do the search for the startups, or is it just a conceptual work that you're doing?
We lean more on the conceptual side, but we are happy to help kind of structure what that might look like for that particular company. And if we need to help source the first few deals or help make some introductions to founders so that they can get their feet wet in the corporate venture capital environment and just start to understand what those relationships look like and what it means to talk to startup founders, we're more than happy to play in that space as well.
Uh-huh. Do you find that this was a trend that is now subsiding, the corporate venture units of large corporations? Is it still a big trend?
I think it's still kind of up and coming, to be frank. There's a lot of companies that for many years were concerned about playing defense more than anything when it comes to potentially disruptive startups. And I think that the ideals around corporate venture capital and the idea that you can make strategic investments in organizations that sit outside your company is something that a lot of folks are still kind of coming to terms with and learning how that can be beneficial to them and to their organization without necessarily opening the door to the type of disruption that worries them.
Mm-hmm. And is there a change in the impediments to innovation, or is it like a constant thing? Would you say that it's always the first thing is culture, or is there
I think it's relatively
thin
constant.
red line?
Yeah, I think it is relatively constant. And what we see is that companies that are afraid of giving the people within the organization the freedom to explore, and ultimately you'll hear me talk about failure all the time, but giving them the freedom to try things and to fail along the way are those that struggle with the ideas of innovation, because basically the activities that support and foster innovation within a corporate culture are largely kind of dichotomous with the metrics that most organizations use to measure their health. So, if you look at large companies, they're focused on quarterly returns, on increasing shareholder value, on internal rate of return, things like that, that generally do not support longer term efforts. And one of the biggest challenges with innovation is that it isn't quick. It is one of those things that takes time. It's generally, a multi-year commitment to start seeing the benefits of those labors, of those investments, things like that. And the idea that, a company might have a team that is dedicated to spending money to try weird things that do not ultimately offer an immediate return on investment is a really hard pill to swallow. However, and I think that, again, kind of coming back to that corporate venture capital idea, part of the reason that that is becoming more attractive is that it forces companies to align their thinking to that of traditional VCs who know going into it that they're going to place a lot of bets along the way and that only a couple of those bets are going to pay off, but they're going to pay off in such an outsized manner that they pay for all of the failures. Yeah. And so companies are kind of, I think, learning to play in that similar space and mindset.
Mm-hmm. I do want to talk more about startups and the VC part of your work. But before that, there's something interesting that I read that I'd like you to expand more about. It's the meeting cost calculator. It's you've created. What is it?
So that's actually a great segue into our kind of venture efforts. So Meeting Cost Calculator is a product that the team at Apollo21 has ideated and built and launched all kind of on our own. So it is wholly owned and operated by Apollo21. And basically, we looked around I don't know, about a year ago or so, and there was a lot of chatter around the impact of meetings, particularly coming out of the pandemic. And if you look at some of the metrics around how remote work in the pandemic has impacted the way that people spend their time while they're doing their jobs, what you will find is that the amount of time that people spend in meetings has increased incredibly. I believe that the number is 250% or so.
Oh,
So we are
wow.
spending 2.5 times more of our time in meetings to accomplish the same amount of work. And we're getting 150% more meeting invites. So there's more meetings happening and they're taking up more of our time. And of course, the downside to that is that the people who are doing the work are then sitting around in meetings and not finding the time to get the actual work done. And so they're forced to make a tough decision. And so as an employee, you either get less of your work done every week because you're spending all of your time in meetings, or you eat into your personal time to
Yeah.
do the work that you didn't get done because you were
Mm.
sitting in meetings. And either way, no matter how you slice it, somebody ends up unhappy.
Mm.
Either, the managers are unhappy because less work is getting done, or the employees are unhappy because the work that's getting done is getting done outside of work hours. And so we created meeting cost calculator as a means to really begin to quantify and put the most valuable metric we could think of, which was dollars, in front of every one of those meetings, so that people could begin to understand what their meeting culture looked like and really what the cost of that meeting culture is. And depending on, again, what source you look at, there's estimates that for every employee, you are paying something along the lines of $25,000 a year of their time in sitting around in meetings, which equates to, I believe, globally $37 billion every year that we
Mhm.
are paying people to sit around in meetings. And so if you look at it, there are better ways to get work done. And so we built the tool to help people begin to understand and quantify that and have some sort of measurable means to figure out what the impact of meetings is within their workplace.
Mhm. But this does this tool quantify meetings across the line, or does it assign a different value to meetings depending on whether they're really valuable or bringing anything or not?
So that's a great question. Today, meeting cost calculator is exactly that. It is a meeting cost calculator. So it knows what the cost per employee is and how much time those employees are spending in meetings. And it spits out a dollar value that says, Danny's time in meetings this week cost $4,938 or
Yeah.
whatever it was. Future iterations of the tool, however, are very focused on shifting from meeting cost calculator into the world of meeting value calculator. And so we've spent a fair bit of time thinking about what types of technologies, especially new technologies, are available to us that can help us begin to understand and quantify whether a meeting is valuable or not. And so I should be clear, our goal with meeting cost calculator is not to get rid of meetings. They are a fact of doing business today, and we have no expectation that we're
Of
suddenly just
course.
going to cancel
We
all
need to
meetings and
communicate, of course. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. But to your point, if we can figure out how to quantify the value of those meetings, then we can start to figure out more clearly who needs to be in a given meeting in order to make a decision. How long does that meeting need to be?
Mm.
Was this meeting valuable, or do we need to rethink how long or how that meeting happens next week or next month or whenever it happens again? And so that is very much the future facing goal of the tool. We just had to start with something that was easily measurable and understandable. And of course, in the business world, dollars make everything go round.
Yeah, wow. This will be a blast, the tool. It sounds very promising, very much needed, I'd say.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
mean, it was needed back then when I was in corporate, and now even more considering the
Yeah, it's one of those never-ending challenges.
yeah. Yeah. All right, let's talk about venture capital now. What do you do in this sphere with Apollo 21?
So
Mm-hmm.
I should be clear. We are not a venture capital firm, full stop. We operate as, in part, a venture studio And we do that a little bit differently. So we do not have a fund attached to our business, which means that we are not injecting capital into other companies. The way that we support companies through the venture studio is in part by creating things like meeting cost calculator that we've ideated and created internally. But then we also partner with early stage founders and effectively operate on a discount for equity type of structure. So, early stage founders are always strapped for cash, and we know that getting the first MVP out the door is often one of the hardest things to do. And so, for the partners that we think have an amazing idea and who are willing to engage with us in this manner, we are happy to take equity in lieu of some of the cash earnings that, Apollo21 might charge for just a straight development process in order to help support them and help get them further down the field and further towards launch and hopefully towards product market fit so that they can begin to build a valuable company.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. And how many startups are you engaged with right now?
Right now, there's a couple that we're working with. It varies based on sort of what we have going on at any given time, and often those folks will come to us and will help with the very early stage MVP builds and some of the prototyping and the customer development process. We're huge fanatics about lean customer development and understanding and really heavily validating the idea behind a startup before we ever start building. And so a lot of our time is spent helping founders navigate that process. And in fact, we are in the process right now of building out the first cohort for an accelerator program that is focused purely on that customer development process. So we're basically inviting what I call napkin stage founders, very early stage founders, to join the accelerator program and spend about 3 months working alongside our team and a number of experts that we've brought in from other areas of the business to heavily validate and kind of interrogate their ideas so that by the time they're done, by the time they're ready to go and build an MVP, for example, they know exactly what it is they're looking to build. And ideally, they've talked to 30, 50, 100 people, and they have their first 10 customers kind of lined up and banging on the door going, oh my God, I need that. Can you build it already, please?
Mm-hmm. So the accelerator is within your company, or are you doing it in partnership with a VC firm?
No, that is within our organization.
Yeah.
So that is called, the accelerator program is called Launchpad. And if folks are listening and they're interested in it, they can find more information at countdowninitiated.com.
Would you repeat that, because there was a slowdown in internet connection just right when you were speaking out the
Sure. Yeah, the URL for our accelerator program is countdowninitiated.com. So think of counting down to launch a rocket or your company or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So this means that for startups, you're actually more on the product design side rather than innovation, because innovation is integrated in the product design, I would suppose.
It is. And if you think about, innovation and the impacts of the efforts around innovation, realistically, you kind of can't separate the ideas of startups and innovation. Right. And, I think that's what trips up a lot of larger organizations as well. Larger companies get stuck in their ways. They have a product that is selling and doing well, and that's how they've built their business. But then they look around and, all of a sudden some startup comes from around the corner and is aiming to disrupt that industry. And so startup disruption and corporate innovation in many ways are kind of two sides of the same coin in my mind. So, big companies build something, they grow big and become the incumbent, and then the next startup comes around and aims for disruption. And there are ways to make those two sides of the coin work together. And then there's, the more traditional path that we see, which is startups disrupt industries and they grow to become the incumbent. And then the whole cycle happens again.
Yeah. And so the way they usually disrupt is via business models. It's not really via product modification or change, unless it changes the business model. And then there's just competition if it's just a minor product innovation. Wouldn't you say?
Agreed.
Usually,
I think that minor product innovations are difficult to turn into a fully disruptive kind of business. However, the rate at which technology is changing enables, I think, new products and new business models to come to bear that perhaps weren't even possible when
Right.
an incumbent company started their business. And so, for better or worse, large companies are generally not great at keeping up with the pace of change of technology, which is why startups have a place in industry and, have that kind of poised, disruptive opportunity in front of them.
That's a great point. Now, how do you see the future of large corporations when it comes to surviving the emerging technologies?
I think that there's a number of ways about it. There's some companies that are building internal innovation labs and things like that where they're trying to experiment and play in the space. I think that can work, although it is a pretty difficult business model or difficult model to create successfully. This is where I come back to sort of corporate venture capital and the idea of partnership and investment into startups and smaller companies. So, if you think about the old way of doing things, if you will, corporations would look at a potentially disruptive startup and get scared and go, "Oh my God, we need to defend our turf. How do we make sure that this startup, doesn't grow, or how do we change our messaging or our offering to limit their opportunity for growth?" And I think that what we're starting to see with the idea of corporate investment into startups is almost like building out an insurance policy. So if you're a large company and you see a disruptive startup coming to, change your industry, another way to look at that situation is, well, if we invest in that startup and they don't succeed, then we've lost a little bit of capital, which we probably would have spent on marketing or something else anyway. But if they do succeed, then we own a stake in that company. And effectively, we're hedging our bets against the future of our own industry by investing in the disruption itself. And therefore, even if the larger company fails or begins to slow down, they still have the financial upside of that investment to kind of pad them and help think about what the future might look like and whether, an acquisition might be in order for rolling that disruptive startup into the operations of the larger company, or whether they want to just kind of shift their mindset and their business model entirely and let that disruptive startup become the next incumbent.
Mm-hmm. It sounds fantastic in theory. The question is, would the incumbents be fast enough to integrate all of these new ventures and new innovations within their culture? Because it's so difficult to change culture specifically, and that's I guess required to integrate these new companies. And also, to my observation, usually corporate venture capital units look for startups that provide a product or a service that the existing company needs. It's like they're not forward thinking. They're trying to replace a supplier or a vendor with the product that the startup is providing. So I personally am not very optimistic in the ability of incumbents to
I never
successfully run corporate venture capital units.
Absolutely. And I never said it was easy. There's no question. I'm not making the claim that this is an easy change to swallow, but there is the opportunity for that change. And, I've been to a number of events recently and heard some corporate VCs talk about why they invest in what they do and what their kind of investment thesis is. And for better or worse, I think we're starting to see a bit of a shift to be more inclusive around companies that might otherwise be disruptive to their own operations, or, to your point, that allow them to expand into a new technology space faster than they could do on their own. And so the integration of the startup into the company culture becomes less about tying down the people in the startup, for example, and more about creating something entirely new that both organizations can take advantage of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What does personally excite you in this line of work?
For me, it always comes down to solving the problem. I get excited about challenging problems, especially ones that other folks are banging their heads against, and I just sort of can't help but, have my brain start turning on, oh, interesting, you said this is a problem. Why? Why does that happen? How do we solve it? What technology could play a role in it? And I even if it's not something that I'm working on, like, my brain will spin on it for a while until I just sort of either get it out of my system or have an opportunity to say to somebody, I've got this idea, we need to talk about it.
Fantastic. Danny, where can people reach you, sign up for your newsletter, and sign up for the accelerator again?
Absolutely. So our company website is Apollo21.io. We have a bunch of case studies and articles and all sorts of fun stuff that you can read there. We do have a weekly newsletter called Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, which is focused on all of the wonderful things that we've been chatting about. That is available at innovatedisruptordie.com. And then, of course, once more, the URL for the accelerator program is countdowninitiated.com.
Is there a deadline for the accelerator, or is it on a rolling basis?
It's on a rolling basis right now. We're getting the first cohort together, and so it's a little bit of a question of how long is it going to take to get the first batch of companies in. And to be frank, we're sort of experimenting with it and getting our feet underneath us with that program, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, fantastic. Good luck with that. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the insight. Anything else that you'd like to share?
I have a
I don't
personal
know,
motto
just
that
leaving space for anything that we've missed.
sure. Well, now I feel like I have to fill it. I'm often asked for a piece of advice, and the one that I have lived by myself and that I enjoy sharing is fail beautifully, which is sort of a personal motto, and it's a reminder to me that anything worth trying is worth trying well, and you're going to fail along the way inevitably. So just learn to embrace that and enjoy the ride.
Fantastic. This sounds good. Fail beautifully. That means with pride.
Yes, very much so.
With pride. I had fun talking to you, Danny. Good luck
Oh, thank you.
With the first cohort of the accelerator and with everything you do. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Welcome to the Grow and Learn podcast, your go-to source for expertise and insights on a variety of topics: business growth, leadership, technology, personal and business finance, and more. We've curated a vast network of business experts ready to address your company's most pressing challenges. From corporate growth strategy to leadership, marketing strategy, sales strategy, branding, customer relations, technology, AI, IT security, and beyond, we connect you to the best experts for your needs. Reach out to us for more information or schedule a call at grownlearn.org to explore how we can support you.